We are here to think about religious symbols and to put religious symbolism in context and to unlock their meanings within the symbols, and here to put into context what we mean by religious symbols. Now, you may well know that I don't use the word religion, I use the word spiritual, but most of you wouldn't find this website, this podcast rather, location if I put spiritual symbols, because most people equate the two. They are equatable, but if I put spiritual symbols, I would lose maybe a quarter of my clicks. Why do I have a problem with the word religion? The word religion, not spiritual aspects, spirituality, but religion. I'll quickly mention, because if you get your mobile phone and you go online and you type in the word religion, word etymology, i.e. the root of the word, it means to bind, to bind. And in modern society, people reject and run away from any idea of being bound or obligated. And indeed, this is a major problem within spirituality today, is that many of the big religions lose that sense of freedom, but you become bound to a system. The system itself is there to find liberty, salvation, enlightenment, awakening, well-being. All these are desirable, of course. Liberty, salvation. Who in their right mind is going to say that they don't want any of these qualities? Could add wealth, but wealth is not typically considered religious, to be rich. So the word religare in Latin means to bind. The word religion means to be bound. But of course, it doesn't mean to be enslaved, to become a slave to these ideas. What it means instead is to apply yourself to a particular path, a particular way. So let's move on to the symbolism. So when I say religious symbols, I'm going to say spiritual symbols, because spirituality implies a lot more freedom and less obligation to attend a church, attend a mosque, to do bhakti in a Hindu shrine. Now, religion, we've looked at the word religion. So what do we mean by symbol? Symbolism is an idea that relates to an image, a story, a myth, a fable, a parable, or an illustration, an artistic illustration. So in paintings, you might have an apple, and the apple may denote Adam and Eve, where Eve ate the apple, which becomes to represent the fruit, the unforbidden fruit, the fruit of knowledge. But then apples all relate to the computer company, to Apple. And they may not have their logo anymore, but the apple, it's used symbolically. So an apple is symbolism, but it doesn't pertain to the original meaning of a symbol. The word symbol comes from the Greek, symbolin. And symbolin meant token. It still means token, but it meant token. And a token was this. In ancient Greek and Mesopotamia and the Far East, a symbol was this. That. Okay. And what was that? Now, ancient contracts, put that trowel down. In ancient contracts, a symbol was a token. A token was a basic contract between two people. So I would go with with this piece, literally, and the other person would go with that piece. And if they joined together when they met, which is difficult to forge, they met perfectly, because see, it's seamless. That they were symbols. It was a token, two tokens which represented a contract. It was an idea. It expressed the legality and the legal bounding of irrefutable that the agreement has been made between two things. So symbol. Now, spiritual symbols started out as ideas to convey concepts, to convey meanings. But the problem with today is that a lot of people associate the symbol and work with the symbol, but the symbol is there to oppress other people, to show you're better than other people, that you've found the way, the truth. So symbols can also be used, in multiple ways, which I will show you now actually, rather than carry on talking. So a sound. If I would say to you A or apple, for example, apple, the apple, it's got two consonants, the A and the ul. So the A is a sound, A, as in for apple, A. Or it's A. Able is A, B, A or A, A or A. It actually has two sounds in one. So if I was to say able, we'll go A for ant, A for ant, A for able, A for alphabet, or A for abolition, or A. But A is a sound. It's not expressed as a symbol. A symbol is something that is visible. It is inscribed, originally carved in stone, depicted on porcelain, and then written down on the reed paper called papyrus. So a symbol is something that is written down, noted, carved, inscribed. The alphabet, the Western alphabet, call it the Roman alphabet, but the alphabet comes from the Phoenicians, which was then adopted by the Greeks, and then it went on adopted by the Romans, and then spread through the Roman Empire. The A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H to Z alphabet comes from the Phoenicians. In Phoenicia, what do we mean by Phoenicia? Well, we mean by Phoenicia, we mean from the Gaza Strip all the way up through Sidon, Tyre, Ashura to Beirut and Tyre. All that area was on the coastal land. It's called Phoenicia. And they in turn adopted their alphabet from who? They adopted it from the inhabitants of that land, the Canaanites. The Canaanites, ancient civilization. We're talking 2500 BC, or BCE if you wish, and then up to 800 BC before the rise of the Phoenicians. 2000 years as a civilization where Phoenicia is, along that coast in the Middle East. And anyway, so this is how it started. So The 2,500 years ago, the the Canaanite people, they decided to develop an alphabet. So this was not drawn, they would say, for an ox. They would say Aleph. It's Aleph. So they had a language, but it wasn't written down. And if it's not written down, it's not a symbol. It's a spoken word, a phonetic sound, but the sound is not noted, right? So how do we get from sound into a symbol? Okay, well, this was Aleph. Aleph meant ox. So they realized that they could take the sound of their animals and things around them and form an alphabet. So the Aleph became A, or A. Now, the Phoenicians took this symbol after the Canaanite language, and they turned it that way. And they also lost the I, modified it a bit. This became the letter A. I'll show you how. Let's move on to the letter A. So the A is here. Now in the Phoenician time, they read from the right to the left. In English, okay, English language and European languages, we read from the left to the right. But they used to write from the right to the left, the Phoenicians. Now, then the ancient Greeks came along, but they took the Phoenician alphabet, but they, like us, read from the left to the right. So they took the symbol with that, and they spun it again. Because it was the wrong direction, we go from there to there, they spun it round to there. So these are the two horns of the original the letter from the Canaanite language. The Phoenicians then lost the I, twisted it there, and then the Greeks twisted it again because they're reading from right to left instead of left to right. The A. So this was once the horns of an ox. The letter B came from the Canaanite word for house, meaning better. It's found in the word Bethlehem. The letter K, kappa, meant hand. Bit shaped, if you can see a K there, a K, sort of K. But a K meant hand. So all these objects around them had a sound, but didn't have a letter. Then they realized we'll take that sound, we're going to turn it, draw the image of the ox, or the hand, or the house, and then it evolved into a more abstract letter. Of course, symbols are not just letters. Symbols can also be money signs, notes, numbers. All these are symbols. It's a sort of, symbols are a form of form of language. You may see, so this later on, you may say, recognize this. It's the fish. Now this fish, as it is in this symbol, was not a letter, but some Christian people among you and Muslim people among you will know that this is an abstract symbol of a Christian symbol. We'll go into that in more detail in another podcast, the symbolism behind that. So when they came to form these letters, they had to carve them on rock or on pottery, paint them on pottery and glaze it. All symbols are composed of either a dot, a straight line, or a curved line. Every single letter in the alphabet has a variation of a dot, a straight line and a curve. We start off with the straight line, the dot, and the curve. And any hieroglyph in the ancient Egyptian kingdom also is composed of each character is formed from a combination of a percentage of a curve and a straight line and a, and then maybe also a dot. Have dimension. So if I go back to the letter A, we can see that this has no curve. It's represented by one line, two lines, and a line that crosses over two. It's called a cruciform line. It crosses over, but there's no curve or dot in that letter. Do you see? But there are other letters like an S or a U which have a curve. It's amazing how you can get all the alphabet letters from a line and a curve, and then usually a dot to add a kind of pronunciation to the word. Now, some people would argue that symbols are also colors. In America, you know that the Republican Party tends to identify with the color blue, and the Republican Party with red. And then maybe the more liberal, left wing or Green Party would wear yellow. But so you would never see a member of the Republican Party wearing a blue tie because they would identify with a colour. In England, you have the Labour Party is always represented by green, the Conservatives with blue, and the Liberals were all Liberal Democrats always with yellow. And across in Spain, France, it's amazing how primary colours also, that some people would argue that a colour is a form of symbol. Going back briefly, you'll see these symbols represent money. But rather than talk about the money, you see the dollar sign has a straight line, one curve, two curves, three curves. The pound has a curve. The arc of the curve we're not interested in. It's crossed with a straight line, more curves. So all symbols, as I've said to you, the beautiful curve with two lines, all composed of a straight line or a curve. So when we go talk about religious symbols, we must understand that they represent concepts and ideas more than, say, a sound. A letter represents a sound. Money, dollar sign represents money. And a musical note, which I haven't got down, maybe a good idea. In the future I could add a note, a quaver, an octave note, note. And a colour. But religious symbols are there to try to orientate you toward illumination, liberation, awakening, enlightenment, or to find some values and morality. So don't think of them as an obstacle, but they are to many people an obstacle. Why? Because you see the symbol and you go, well, what's that? Now, you may not care about symbols, and in fact I'll tell you at the end of this little podcast on symbol is actually the symbol itself is an obstruction because it represents an anchor to something material or visual. But real freedom and enlightenment, awakening and liberty is when you move beyond symbols. Symbols are just tools. So you may find an obstacle. You may say, what's that symbol? Well, maybe you just can't move beyond symbols, but we're going to look at symbolism and look at the meanings behind these symbols and work out what they imply, because symbols imply concepts and complex ideas. So the basic symbol would be a cross. In ancient Phoenician and Canaanite, this was called a tau. very much the same shape of a T. T meant Tau. This could be like a little letter T. You see, the T comes from ancient Phoenician script, and then before that the Canaanite script. T, two crosses, a cross. This is called cruciform. See, because that line crosses that. Cruci, crucify, crucifixion, cross, all relate to the word to cross over. So this is a basic cross. But even the basic cross has then again evolved. So in the next podcast, which will follow this, we're going to look at how these simple shapes can it means so much and compound and form so many complex family of ideas. So you see here, what do you see here? We see cross. Similar, we go, well, it's a cross, okay, it's an add sign if you're maths. But we're talking about spiritual symbols, so we're now going to move into the spiritual dimension. Pursue these ideas along spiritual lines. So you go, what's a cross? It is. So is that a cross? Okay, what's the difference? Well, there's a lot of difference there actually. There's a huge lot if you want to go into symbolism and understand them. Now, this is called the Greek cross, and this actually is the cross of the Eastern Orthodox, the Eastern Catholic faith. It's a Christian faith, you know, which includes Greece, Russia, Ukraine, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania. All these are Eastern Orthodox churches, and this is their cross. And everything for the Latin Orthodox, from the Pope and the Vatican, they use that cross. That cross is used in all the Catholic countries in Europe, and then all the colonies of the ex-European, Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, all the Catholic countries. The Roman Catholic use that cross, and then the Eastern Orthodox use that cross. Why are these two crosses? But these represent the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and the other one is the Western Orthodox Christians. Massive. It's a massive difference. We're going to go into this difference in a following podcast. So you see, symbols also are found wherever we go, in traffic signs. Brands like Coca-Cola, it's red, it has its distinct combination of curves. It's a very curvy one, called a cursive script. Very curves, there's no straight line in that logo. Then we have another one, we have another symbol. Well, this symbolizes what? This symbol. We've got straight lines and curves we've been talking about. We've got the color to identify it. If this is blue, it wouldn't be the same. This is a recognizable logo. What do we mean by this? Well, here we mean food. We mean eating. Kentucky Fried Chicken. This is the man. It's supposed to represent a happy time and eating. We're eating. Cheap meal. Don't forget that the oil and the fat and the processed food, the chickens are slaughtered in humane conditions. The fat they use can build up of saturated fat within our cholesterol, heart conditions and damage, and it's arguably garbage. This food, there's no vegetables, there's no meat, there's no garbage. It's called finger licking good, but it's supposed to symbolize a happy time. Now, we're not interested in symbolism going about food. Well, drink, coffee, money, and music. We're interested in symbols, spiritual symbols. Now, what is the difference between a symbol representing food or coffee or more drink, or let me get that one again. There you go. Or money? We're talking about spiritual symbols. So we can forget about food symbols, we can forget about money symbols, we can forget about musical symbols, we forget about mathematical symbols, and we may forget about any other symbols that we can come to our mind. Not so many. So symbols, religious symbols. Religion we don't like to use too much. We use spiritual symbols. Symbol come from the word symboline. Symboline meant a token. It was represented something. It represented a concept, a contract, an idea. Symbols represent ideas. Spiritual symbols are there to represent concepts. Now, a lot of people may go, well, a spiritual symbol, what? Why do I want a spiritual symbol or an object? Well, a lot of people come to spirituality because they've had difficulty in their life. They haven't found the solution with friends and family, or they wake up and question the world around them. And in this waking up, may have problems, and of course, or wanting to find more deeper meaning of life and where they are and what life is all about. So religious symbols represent complex contexts and ideas, but by understanding religious symbolism, we can break down these concepts and remember spiritual symbolism and symbols rather is there to represent and help you to orientate yourself to ideas of moral ideas, ethical ideas, virtues and qualities, enable you to hopefully find your own algorithm and the answers to life and to who you are, where you are, what life is. And for some of us, we may be able to find liberty, freedom, and awakening. And symbolism is, religious symbolism is they're trying to give you keys of ideas to penetrate a part of your mind which works with symbolism, not so much your frontal cortex, but your parietal cortex, but then your inner mind, your limbic system and your hippocampus, and then deep within your your temporal lobe, where the inner workings of your mind are. The symbols can penetrate more than, say, a visual object around you. Have a visual objects all around you, a map, a hat, a thing. Symbols penetrate within you at a different level than many things around you. So they're like keys to your subconscious, open doors to levels or dimensions of your mind, which basically physical, obvious, immediate reality does, but in a different way. This is an introduction to symbols and approaching the ideas of symbols. There is one podcast on Christian and Islamic symbolism, and there is one podcast on Hindu, Indian and Indian religion. And there is one about the appropriation of symbols, which include Judaism and Indian faith, and how symbols are appropriated and passed around with different societies. And then there's one we look at pagan symbols. We include the Native American Indians, the Apaches, Comanches, and we also include the pagan faiths of today, Wicca and Druidism and Gaiaism, and more connected to universal natural religion. Will include Taoism in that. Taoism from the Orient, even from beyond to China. So beyond this podcast, there are 3 or 4 further podcasts in this mini series where we're going to approach and break down some of these complex ideas which exist within spiritual symbols. I hope you've learned something. I've very much enjoyed delivering this podcast. I know we've had slows, ups and downs, but if you could connect to what I've said, you're going to find you can orientate you towards where we're going with symbols. Thank you.